And welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. I am joined today by our publisher, Ronnie Sanders, and Paul Finebaum returns with us back on the show. He's been on with us a few times before, and we always appreciate it. Paul, I know it's been a busy couple weeks for you over the last couple weeks. We're obviously going to get into that, but hope you had some good time off for the holidays and at the end of the football season.
Yeah, Nathan, thank you. No, I don't remember the holidays. I remember being at the Rose Bowl, and since then it's been a blur. So, but Ronnie and I have been down the roads like this before, covering Alabama. But I'm really excited about the new year, primarily because we finally made it to 24, where we have Oklahoma and Texas and the 12-team playoff.
How do you see? We can just start with the obvious, the Alabama hire. I mean, we were talking a little bit before we came on. Where do you see this going, and what do you think so far?
Well, I mean, I think as we talk here today, it's a little hard to answer that question because there are so many things happening. We're a week since the announcement of Kalen DeBoer. I think most people thought it was a good hire. Most people thought the transition would be smooth, but most people were wrong, by the way. This has been a chaotic couple of days. I expected some defections. I didn't expect what we are seeing. And I think, every time I hear from about Alabama friend, Ronnie and Nathan, and they say, I can't believe how bad it is, I caution it can get worse. It still can get worse, and it very well may.
Yeah, look across the state the last 2 years.
Exactly.
Well, Paul, you had sort of, I guess, maybe seen it coming is maybe the wrong phrase, but we had talked on this show last summer during last season, and I think you had just kind of talked about how it felt like maybe not exactly after this season, but it felt like we were sort of getting to the end of the Saban era. I guess, how surprised were you that he ultimately decided to retire?
I don't want to be that guy, Nathan, who said I knew it all along, but you could see this coming. It's been building for a while, and I think really any one of the last couple of years he could have walked away. And this year it just really seemed different. In talking to people close to him and watching him, I was in Tuscaloosa twice this year. I saw Saban at the championship game, the Rose Bowl. So I mean, I saw him a good bit during the season. There was. It's hard to quantify, but it's like a degree or two different, less intense, friendlier. And I really, getting older, you can start to relate to people who are older than you, but not that much. And I saw some things that a lot of friends of mine go through. They're conflicted. Do I really want to do this? And I think he kept asking himself that question. And I think when the season turned out the way it did with the Auburn win and the win over Georgia, I got a call the next day from somebody very close to him. The next day after the championship game, the SEC game, and he said, "Don't be surprised if this is it," because what else did he really have to prove? I think a lot of people said, "Well, he's going to win a championship." That I think beating Georgia and getting to the playoffs was such an accomplishment for this Alabama team, which, let's be honest, wasn't that great at times. And I think he started thinking about it. And even in Pasadena a couple of weeks ago, he seemed like he was close to the end. And then I think the game was so bizarre. The ending was so un-Saban-esque that I think a lot of people just forgot about it. But and another thing, anytime you tried to bring it up, which I did, you got shot down so fast, you just said, you know what, it's not worth talking about.
It was his word. I mean, I've talked to people around the program as well. I mean, 16 straight 10-win seasons. It was almost like his worst nightmare was going 8-4 and ending up in the Gator Bowl. Yeah. And this is almost, I mean, if I remember right, Paul, you were around before I was, but I think Bryant went 8-3 his last year, something like that.
Yeah, his last season, he went, I believe, 8-4. They were number 2 in the country, and they lost to Tennessee, and then they lost to LSU, Southern Miss, and Auburn, and it was over.
And I'm not sure that Nick wanted to go out that way. I mean, 16 straight 10-win seasons.
I don't think he did, Ronnie. And I think he saw how close it was. And if you go back and diagram the season, could have lost Ole Miss, Tennessee, A&M, LSU, Auburn, Georgia, Michigan. I mean, there could have been 4 losses there. Last year, we know there could have been 5. And I think he knew. Hey, listen, the Michigan game, you could say, hey, we made it. We went to semifinals. There's no shame in that. I mean, under normal Saban circumstances, that would seem shameful because we were so used to him winning every year. But I think he was comfortable with that. And the portal and all the things that we all obsess about, I think he said, you know what, I don't need it anymore. He's got all the money he needs. He's got 4 homes. He's got an offer, I'm sure, from ESPN. Why bother?
How much effect did NIL have on this, do you think?
Well, I mean, we know how he felt about it, but I mean, I think there's two aspects of that. The NIL is pretty self-explanatory. Everybody gets whatever they get. I think what he hated was having to deal with his own players after the final game every year, and having to deal with them saying, hey, coach, I don't know if I want to stay here any longer, and that will drive any sane person crazy. And it's never ending. And I feel pretty comfortable in saying that even after the Rose Bowl, he was having to call donors and saying, hey, I need this much money. I need that much money. And there comes a point when that becomes really tiresome when you're Nick Saban.
We'll get a little bit later into obviously how this affects Auburn and sort of where they go in this new era. But let's talk just for a second, Paul, about Kalen DeBoer, just because from an Auburn perspective, there's a lot of interest in how that hire is going to pan out. You mentioned how it's been chaotic already, I believe. 30 total for Alabama transfer portal entries, and some really high-profile players, a trio of 5 stars in Downs, Proctor, and Julian Sayin this morning. It seems, at least from the outside, Paul, and you can tell me how you sort of perceive the hire, that they obviously went the direction of on-field coaching, a guy who's been an offensive genius over somebody who has familiarity with the area. And that's what, Auburn fans and other fan bases are going to point at and say, well, that's not going to work out. I guess just, what's your sort of devil's advocate, perspective of why that may or may not work in terms of his fit at Alabama?
Well, I mean, the one thing we don't know is who said yes, who said no. I would have gone to Dan Lanning first or somebody else. And I mean, more I hear about Dan Lanning, it may have been difficult for him to get out of where he was. He's, in addition to the $20 million buyout, I mean, he's pretty connected out there in terms of Nike, and it just may have been impossible. And maybe he didn't want it either. Maybe he figured there'll be another time, maybe after I hit 40. So I think DeBoer was probably the best of the available. And, well, I mean, I'm not including Lane Kiffin, who was available and who would have taken it, but clearly they didn't want him. So, I mean, you got to look at it from an AD standpoint. Does he have baggage? Does he have a good resume? Yeah, we may take a hit early on, but can he make up for that? And those are all. I mean, DeBoer is a phenomenal choice from a pedigree, from a resume. But the one thing I didn't know a week ago, and I know less today, is can he recruit in the SEC? I thought Brian Harsin was a good choice too, but he couldn't recruit. Therefore, he failed miserably.
Well, I think for me, and we've been watching this a long time together. What does this look like? Is it Dennis Franchione? Is it Mike Price? Is it, I mean, what does this look like in 3 years?
Well, I mean, today we're talking today, a couple hours after their number one quarterback prospect bails out. So there's a bit of panic, and there will be. It's a matter of how quickly he can stop the bleeding and recover. He's going to have to He's going to have to develop talent, because I think he'll get some players from Washington. He'll get some players that maybe we don't know that much about. and then he's going to have to make it work. But for anybody to say that he's not behind already is simply being dishonest. I think it's just how far behind is he, and how does he deal with the culture of Alabama football, which, Ronnie, you've just laid out, has just been through the most remarkable 16 years any program's ever gone through. And that's hard. I've watched transitions before. They're difficult. And usually fans want to support you. But the problem is, this isn't Bear Bryant to Ray Perkins. Bear Bryant was dead before Ray Perkins ever walked out to a practice field. Nick Saban won't be. He's still going to be present around in various circles. And let me play a what if. Let's say you have a charity golf tournament in May, which Birmingham does. Who do you want more? You want Kalen DeBoer to be in your featured group? Or you want Nick Saban? And I think he's going to have to face that a lot of time everywhere he goes. And usually the Alabama head coach is the main guy. Nick Saban's still the main guy in Alabama.
And I guess the bigger question, or one of the bigger questions, is how does Saban handle it? Will he be Pat Dye hanging around the program? And or
Hey, yeah. Listen, I love Pat Dye, as I know you, but I'll never forget this story. We knew what he did with Terry Bowden. So Bowden gets fired, and Tommy Tuberville shows up. Now, how many years after Dye? This is 1998, Ronnie.
6 years.
Dye gets run out in 92. That's 6 years.
6
Tuberville. I was very close to Tuberville back then. He calls me on Sunday afternoon or whatever. He gets there Saturday night. He gets there Friday. They introduce him Saturday, and he's out doing everything. So Sunday morning, he gets a call. He's at the hotel at Auburn is. He said he gets a call at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he answers the phone and goes, "Hello." He was like groggy. He said, "Get your ass down here." He said, "Who is this?" He says, "Coach Dye. I'm waiting for you in the lobby." This is 6 years after he gets fired, and Dye is showing up at 6 o'clock in the morning to tell the new coach at Auburn, who replaced the guy that replaced him, the way it's going to be. And that never changed. Do I think Nick Saban will do that? No. I think they're going to try to include Saban in as much as they can. But really, as I was told a week ago, Saban's main job is to preserve the players that he has already retained at Alabama. I'd say he failed at that. Because there was only so much you can't go to Julian Sayon or Caleb Downs and say, "Listen, I know I promised you 2 weeks ago that we got everything worked out, and now I'm gone. I'm asking you now." That doesn't work. No, his credibility with those players is gone, and so I don't know how effective Nick Saban is really going to be because he may be able to help them on Jalen Milroe not going into the portal, but he certainly couldn't help them on other places. And quite frankly, if Ronnie, you've been on more staffs than I have, I'll ask you a question: Does the new guy want the old guy around?
Typically not. Typically not. I mean, and it's not exactly the same, but I was talking to Ron Zook the other day, and we replaced Spurrier at Florida, and it's not, I guess my question is this: if you're Ron Zook and you're the coordinator of the Saints and you get offered the Florida job, you probably can't turn it down. If you're Kalen DeBoer and you've got a good job at Washington, and it's a program that's made the playoff twice, and you've made the playoff, you're going to the Big Ten, you've got access to the playoff every year. Why do you leave? Why do you walk into this?
Well, here's why I think you do. You just lost to Michigan in the championship game, and you got out everything in that game. Out maneuvered, out schemed. Mostly, they had better players than you too. And you get a taste of that, and you think, I can go to Alabama and get those players. That's why people like that job. I've talked to head coaches who go, "I don't have what Alabama has." Lane Kiffin said that before. Same thing about Georgia. There's only one program in the SEC that has the Alabama talent. There are a few that are close, by the way, very close. And I just think it's like a drug. And here's a guy who grew up in South Dakota. He probably knows that Washington is maxed out. Now he's got to go to the Big Ten, and he goes, you know what? I'm going to go for it. But it doesn't. I mean, I think DeBoer can be successful, but he has to get out of this mess he's currently in. Because, the real question I have, and I don't think I can answer, is what is Alabama without Saban? What is Alabama without Bryant? I can tell you what it is. I covered it. Perkins and Curry each had a 10-win season. Stallings had a national championship, but still essentially got fired. You had Mike Dubose, who was a disaster. Dennis Franchione, who left because he couldn't handle the pressure. Mike Price, who couldn't make it to the first game. And Mike Shula, who was just completely inept. So that's what you've had other than Bryant and Saban. It's not that great of a program without those two.
And I guess that was my question. How much of a Saban discount did the players give him coming in, versus the next guy?
And one other thing, I mean, it's still Alabama, but between the two guys, that's 12 national championships.
Right.
They've won a couple of other ones, but I mean, that's not really a fair comparison. One spent 25 years, one spent 17. But it's always going to be a challenge. And the real issue is the Alabama fan base is so used to winning that if DeBoer goes 9-3 this year, it's not a bad record. Misses the playoffs. Anybody going to be happy about the Gator Bowl?
Not at all.
Let's talk a little bit about how you think this affects Auburn, Paul. I mean, every program was licking their chops, obviously, at this situation, not only in the SEC, but I mean, when you have a dynasty like this, that I mean, I hesitate to say comes to an end, but Kalen DeBoer won't be as good as Nick Saban. That's just how it's going to go. What does Auburn need to do over the next 10 months to sort of take this gap, take this change, take this transition, and take advantage of it from what Alabama's going through?
Well, it's in a very good position, and I'm somewhat disappointed that there's been while this is going on, there's been chaos going on at Auburn at the same time. This would have been a great time for that program to be ready to pounce, and I assume that they're close to being ready with the staff now coming together. And by the way, misfiring on your first staff is pretty easy to do. Nick Saban's offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator after year one at Alabama were both out by the second year. So I'm not going to be too hard on Hugh Freeze. These are fast decisions. You got to make them on the fly. But I think it's an opportunity for Auburn, tremendous opportunity for Auburn. I think it's the best opportunity for Auburn really since the middle, probably 2004 under Tommy Tuberville when everything was aligned perfectly. And by the way, I'm well aware I'm skipping a national championship and another appearance at the national championship. But even Chizik in 2010 and Gus Malzahn in 2013, I think they were more aberrations. I think those were more outliers than anything else.
How much can they use this from a recruiting perspective? I mean, they're already what they did in the state in 2024 was massive from an Auburn perspective. What they did with top talent in the state, several position groups, they got the best players in the state over Alabama. How much can Hugh Freeze and his staff start pitching to recruits and say, hey, this is the place to be now, especially now that they've had these connections with players over somebody like Kalen DeBoer? I
think they're in great spot recruiting wise. I mean, there are a couple of players out that are really important, and I think having beaten Alabama once or twice is significant. Hasn't happened many times in recent years. So I feel pretty good. I mean, listen, day to day, there's been a lot of negativity about Auburn. You guys know that better than I do. Well, I've been obsessing over the end of Saban, and you guys are paying more attention to it. But I think if Hugh is smart, I mean, he doubles down now and triples down and makes sure that in the recruiting wars that they make some big wins, whether it's portal players or whether it's next year's class, because I think Auburn is on the precipice of really big and great things.
What do you make of the new staff hires at Auburn? You've got a new offensive coordinator. You got Charles Kelly coming on defense. I mean, you got some new faces, new names. Interesting year.
I like it. I did not like the coordinators last year, especially the offensive coordinator. I don't think I was alone in that. And I think they've been some outstanding hires. And yeah, I mean, for all the noise out there about what's gone wrong and why is this guy no longer on the staff, I don't really care about all that stuff because that's not going to affect next year. What's important is what they're doing right now, because they have this isn't 1985 where 95 where in-state recruiting is as important as it used to be, but there are some players who are going to stay in state, and you've got to win a lot of those battles. And I think right now the signs are tilting more toward Auburn winning them than not.
Speaking of coordinators, just came across last night, Bill O'Brien at Ohio State. What are your thoughts on that?
Not much. I respected this guy as a head coach, and I haven't seen a coordinator as more inept than him in a while. And I'm not talking about just results. I'm talking about what I heard from players, as you have, Ronnie. I mean, there are a lot of complaints about what he did at Alabama, and he did nobody any favors with the best quarterback in the country. And I'm not saying you can look at what he did in New England this year. I don't think anybody could have saved that mess. But it's a really weird. I mean, I hate to put a guy on a hot seat that has 10 losses over 6 years, but I think Ryan Day is now clearly in hot seat territory.
I would agree. I mean, there was a lot of chatter at the coaches convention. I was up there in Nashville, and there was a lot of talk that, like you say, for a guy that hasn't lost many games, he sure is catching a lot of heat.
He's got, and hey, let's state the obvious. He's got a new AD, and that new AD has fired Hugh Freeze and fired Jimbo Fisher. He's not going to be afraid to fire Ryan Day.
True enough.
Speaking of Ohio State, I think we're all still sort of in this waiting game for Jim Harbaugh in the NFL. The last time we did this show, we were talking about obviously the sign stealing scandal. Of course, since then they go on, they win a national championship, and Michigan's not going to. Michigan fans are, no matter what Jim Harbaugh does, are obviously going to be ecstatic with winning that championship. But it's just crazy to think about, Paul, that we could be in a situation where 3 of the 4 playoff teams from the final 4-team playoff year, 3 of those 4 teams could be getting new coaches if Harbaugh decides to go to the NFL.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, I've been predicting him to leave since the beginning of the year, so I think it's pretty obvious he's on his way, and I think they're in good shape if they promote from within. That's not a bad idea, especially in late January. So, but the fact that Sarkisian is the only guy of the Final Four is pretty remarkable. I hadn't really thought of that.
Well, and I guess this question may be self-explanatory, but why didn't Alabama stay in the Saban tree? I mean, is it just they just couldn't get anybody? I mean, you look at Sark, you look at Lanning, you look at some of the other guys.
Well, I don't think Lanning wanted the job. Sark probably was offered. Probably. I don't know why Sark would have taken it. I mean, he's got a better program right now, talent-wise, than Alabama. He's got everything Alabama has. Lane Kiffin will be the name that I think comes back years from now, and people say, "What happened?" I hate to always go old school, but I'll never forget 1987, New Year's Eve. I'm on the phone with Bobby Bowden. He had just interviewed for Alabama. And early in the day, this was back when you could call a coach, and Bobby Bowden was very affable, unless we were talking about Terry. And he said, "Yeah, I don't know. I think I got the job." And then I called him about 7 or 8 o'clock when he got back from Tallahassee, and he said, "I don't know. Something's really weird." Then I called him about 10. He said, "They're not calling me back anymore." In other words, they had moved on. I had a board of trustee member tell me at 11 o'clock that night that we're going in a different direction than Bobby Bowden. I said, "Well, what's the deal?" He said, "We just feel like his age is too much. He's got just too much baggage to deal with." For 15 consecutive years after that phone call, Bobby Bowden finished in the top 4 in the country and won 2 national championships, and probably should have won 4. And Alabama went through, Bill Curry, Gene Stallings,
DeBose.
You know the greatest hits. And I wonder if years from now people will go, "How come they didn't give the job to Lane Kiffin? He wanted it. I can guarantee he did. Don't ask me how I know." And he never got a call.
Was part of it the baggage? All the stuff that when he was an assistant, and the fact that he was fired the day before the national championship game. And
yeah, I think at that moment, by the way, that decision to fire Lane Kiffin cost Alabama a national championship, and I have no doubt about it. They would have won with Lane Kiffin calling the plays. But I think it did hurt him. And even though he's not the same guy, Kiffin just can't help himself. And then he starts tweeting, trolling. And I understand that you're at Ole Miss and you need to do things, but don't troll Alabama. That's just not a smart thing to do if you're an active SEC head coach.
I guess just as we head into, we might close it out here if that's okay with you, Ronnie. I mean, as we head now into, like you said, this year is going to be so different. I think a lot of people are ready for the 12-team playoff after the chaos of what happened between Bama and Florida State. Talk about the expanded SEC. It's something that I think Hugh Freeze has been looking forward to, because if you're Auburn, you'd like to think 12-team playoff is something that's attainable for a program that can go 9-3, that has proven it can go 10-2. I guess, how much are you looking forward to this next season, Paul, where not only Alabama, not only all these changes in the SEC and beyond, but just sort of the basic structure of the sport is going to be changing as well.
Everything will be different, Nathan. We're so used to the standards. Are you in contention for the West? Are you bowl eligible? Double digits. All that's out the window now. And it is, if you're a legitimate SEC program, which Auburn is, how do you get to the playoff? And how do you sell success to your fan base if you don't? With 4, it's not that big a deal. I mean, if you don't win 11, 12 games, you're not going. But now it's a little bit different. And I think if you want to be taken seriously, you have to be in contention. It doesn't mean you make it, but you better be part of the conversation in November. And it also hurts. This year, like, being bowl eligible was important because that was the first year. You better not try to sell bowl eligibility anymore to your fan base, because it's not a standard that will be acceptable. So I think for Auburn, when are they ready? I think in spite of the ending, which was terrible, I think most people felt pretty good about Auburn this year. Competed in the 2 biggest games, could have won both, should have won one, but we still moved ahead of some other programs, and that's really the key. It's like a NASCAR race. You're trying to get ahead of as many cars as you can, so you hit those high embankments where you can draft off of somebody and maybe get a good finish. And that's where Auburn is right now. I think the schedule's manageable, and it's just simply a matter of turning some of those tweener games that you have to win before you can be taken seriously.
Before we let you go, what are your thoughts on the schedules for the teams around the conference? I mean, I was looking through the other day that some of the scheduling is a lot of great games, but the schedules are really uneven.
Yeah, they're completely uneven. And if you want to get Vanderbilt, and after that, you really don't have anything that's going to be, and you want to avoid Georgia. I mean, so it's as simple as that. But I'm trying to think of the game that Auburn lost, and you guys will have to help me. I can't remember it, but I mean, it's a little bit. It will be a little bit different than it has been. But I don't. I'm really interested in where the SEC goes on 9. I mean, after Destin last year, I was convinced 9 games was going to happen. I'm not convinced anymore because I don't think the coaches really want it. Because the schedule is more difficult than it's ever been because you're not playing the predictable. I mean, I think Auburn will catch a break at some point because somebody's got to go once we get into somewhat of a rotation here. Auburn in Georgia. Auburn will play Georgia and Alabama, but maybe you won't get LSU. Maybe you won't get this team, and where do you make up for it? So I think it's going to be really exciting, but we're going to have a log jam though, maybe for that second team for the SEC championship.
No question. And you may have 3 teams in the playoff from the SEC.
And I think that's the normal number. But I want to. I mean, even though I've had some Auburn friends say, "Why have you suddenly gone negative on Auburn?" I haven't gone negative. I just it's hard to wipe away the bowl game. It's hard to wipe away Freeze's comments afterwards, but that's now moving in the rearview mirror. And I think the Alabama opportunity gives me reason to think that Auburn's in a great spot, and I think that's what the coaches are going to focus on. I want to see more out of Hugh Freeze, though. I just found his some of his comments, some of his behavior to be a little peculiar at times. Like maybe he wasn't quite expecting the transformation from Liberty to Auburn to be this difficult. But that's out of the way now. There's no more mystery. I mean, but he is in a great spot to be able to look across the sidelines during the Iron Bowl and not see Nick Saban is pretty spectacular for him.
He certainly did. You've said for a while now that Freeze would be at Auburn longer than Saban was at Alabama, and you were certainly right.
Yeah, I think I just think Auburn ought to calm down a little bit. I mean, I'd like to see. I think he just. There are a lot of things he can say, a lot of things he can't say. I don't know all the details on why all these changes were made, but fans care about one thing: who's on our roster and how many games are we going to win? All the other drama goes away very quickly.
Well, Paul, we appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.